think you heard a lot of information today, but all the topics are connected, so the speakers can leave this depending on whom you are addressing the question. Yes?
Dr. Riyad. Dr. Riyad, you talked about the solar panels in the 10 villages. Did you actually... my question is, did you actually propose this plan to the villages, or it was just a study? I didn't really hear.
That is just a study. But it's a study at AUB, but it's part of a lobby that many people, including myself, are trying to do within the state.
Oh, thank you.
This is an individual effort, not an organized effort.
What exactly needs to be changed with the laws of electricity generation in Lebanon for this microgrid to happen?
Well, I mentioned that most importantly is the law 462, because you see under the prevailing law, nobody is allowed to produce electricity and sell it. And everything you see here, whether in Zambia or anywhere else, is just illegal. So to do that, we have to change the privatization law, which will enable the private sector to participate, generate, distribute and sell and so on. And in particular, the enabling the private sector to operate at the low scale. And when we talk about, in your house, you could use your roof or your garden, you could use, for example, 500 kilowatt, 300 kilowatt. This is not mentioned in the law. Because in the law 462, anything at 1.5 megawatt, megawatt, and below, this is for personal use. So this has to change first. And second, you have to change the law as to enable, to institutionalize rules and regulations to allow you as a private developer to use the grid. EDL would not be reluctant to allow anybody who wants to invest to just use the low voltage or medium voltage grid and work on it.
But
so
the
there should be rules and
metering,
regulations, safety, environmental standards. Exactly.
And by the way, that was the most important law in Germany, which forced the big energy companies to take the energy produced by small and private households, and also to pay a fixed price, so that was no expenditure on the side of the government at all. They forced with the law, they forced the big energy companies and the grid runners to take the energy of the private producers. So I think that's the crucial movement.
Small follow-up question. If there is a law, what's missing? Just a modification to the law, or? Sorry. If there is actually a law 462, the only thing needed is a modification to the law, or actually implementing the law?
There are many things. You see, first of all, Dr. Christina mentioned, it is to establish set of standards, rules, and regulations. That's number one. Number two, you have to modify the law, first of all, to enable action in this thing. And the third thing, you have really to propose a set of incentives that will make the investment profitable for the private sector. See, anybody who has money will not invest unless there is a good internal rate of return on his or her investment.
One more question for Dr. Rashid. The study is very interesting, but I wondered if you took into consideration the costs for the dispatch control center and the people that will run the microgrid. So you took that into consideration as expenses, as salaries when considering the ADL LCOE. Yet, did you take that into consideration when considering the microgrid LCOE? And
no, this is a good question. No, see, our study was only to see if you add PV to the existing diesel generator in the current situation as is, what would be the price, and if it was favorable. But of course, if you want to do this in practice and legalize it, you have to create what we call local control centers and several things that are not taken into consideration.
The microgrid will be medium voltage and low voltage grid will be one of the biggest cost factor in energy transition. And no country is going to do that without public investment and maybe in your case investment of the World Bank, or you probably will not be able to do that by your own financial capacities, because that's, even for Germany, that's a challenge. Grid and storage will be the biggest cost factors that what are, yeah.
I have a question for Dr. Christina. You said that there is a 50% storage loss. What the means for storage used in your model? What are the means for storage used in your model?
We just took a very we are now going to do this in a better way now that we are continuing the program, the project, also including the storage expert institute with a separate model. We just took it as a kind of expert estimation as to also the future storage in 2050, because 50%, yeah, it's just a very rough estimate, and we are going to calculate that now in a better way, also anticipating what storage will be in 2050. But I think they, in this estimation, they used just the storage which are on the market right now, and also used batteries, kind of stuff in households or in industry right now.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Steed, concerning power plant execution till 2028, you said, why we are not thinking about making only green thinking instead of going for more power plants on fuel?
You mean why we're not investing in renewable?
Yes, directly for solar and wind instead of, since in 2050 or 2030 we are going to be
well, this is the challenge, you see. This is the challenge. You can do planning using classical, standard, power plant, combined cycle, reciprocating engine, etc., that use classical fuel oil and diesel oil, and you can go for renewable. The way using renewable will be longer and much more difficult. Dr. Christina just mentioned, there are many technical and non-technical issues along the way. Myself, I would favor going both. You could do planning using renewable, encouraging the renewable at the microgrid level or even at the household level, and at the same time keep an eye on, improving your power supply using the classical or the standard power plant. Because you see, there are many issues related to reliability, related to availability, related to storage, in order to make the power from renewable energy continuous over 24 hours, which is not the case for the other thing. So you have to, balance it, taking into consideration the energy security for the country and the cost at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you.
On the other hand, may I contradict?
Please.
Sure.
On the other hand, as long as you keep the conventional energy sources, then this will be an impediment for the renewables. For instance, in Germany we have the problem that the coal power generation is still running, and there's political issues because the coal workers' lobby is quite strong. There is a kind of a schedule how to end that, but it's not very well driven forward. And so we as long as this is the case, we do not have to solve the storage problem, because the storage problem is the problem which will drive really the energy transition. And this is a way of retarding or slowing down the process, I think. So I think you should be very consequent and really changing as much as possible to renewables, because in 2050 oil and gas will be needed for chemical industry and processes. They are already now, they are kind of have considerations how, with what material will we do certain processes which we need. There is of course power to X, and that's what our technicians or the engineers in our university favor. They say it's even more efficient to produce hydrogen and methane by power to X, so electricity plus you know all that, than to use oil and gas. So I would say
Let me just say a few words.
consequent.
No, there is a difference between what I think or what I believe as a citizen or as a professor and what is the reality of the country. I'm trying to be pragmatic, taking the situation as is.
Yeah, I saw
Law
that.
462 was ratified in the parliament in 2002. Now we are in 2018, a law that was ratified still not implemented. So one has to take into consideration the reality of the country. Now let me say something in favor of what you're saying, where very few people realize that. I mentioned in my presentation that the production cost of electricity in the power plant on average 13 cents per kilowatt hour, right? Okay. The one from the solar and diesel and EDL is around 13.2 cents per kilowatt hour, very close, right? But the fact is not like that. You cannot compare this 13 with this 13. Because since in Lebanon and since the 90s, there is a loss of about 40%, including theft and technical losses. If you recalculate this, how much the cost reaching the customer is not 13 cents. We have calculated that is actually 16.9 cents per kilowatt hour, which means if I am a developer of renewable energy project and I sell not at 13, I sell at 15 cents, I still make 2 cents for me, and I can still save the government 2 cents because actually I don't have a trust or a belief that this theft will be reduced in the coming few years. So that in your favor, but can we do it? I don't know.
Nevertheless, a lot of the decentralized generated energy will be used by the customers themselves or in the small grids which you can install in the neighborhood. And in that kind of collaborative or coordinated endeavor, theft might become much less because the small group of people will make sure, yeah.
And just a piece of information for the new generation. We have done it at AUB through a course project as well. We have calculated how much land do we need if we want to electrify the whole country from PV. And that turned out to be a small piece of land along the Sirs al-Shari, the eastern part that nobody uses and is deserted.
Yeah,
Small part of it.
Yeah.
You know. This again, you see.
Yeah, you don't need very much.
You need laws, you need compliance.
Yes, that's
And you need the politicians to agree on this. Yes.
Yes. Who has the microphone?
Dr. Riyad, just some small non-technical questions. Do you seriously believe that the government will legalize the private sales and generation of power, given that they are absolutely the biggest beneficiaries of diesel distribution in the country?
They have to. I think there is no alternative.
But they are making much more money from private sales of
They will find ways
diesel.
to make money, don't worry about it. They will always find ways irrespective. But you see, no, they have, it's just, there is no other way now but to have the private sector, because you see, they have ratified the PPP law. That was ratified last year. They have to implement it. And the privatization law, sooner or later, will be implemented again. So the private sector will get in, and the private sector will make more profit. Now with the PV cost of around 3-4 cents per kilowatt hour, is very competitive with anything else, except the water, which we don't have, in the capacity that we need. Therefore, the private sector would go renewable for sure.
I see. Just one more small question. In your studies, are you factoring in that the Prime Minister has mentioned that he might actually be in favor of increasing the price of electricity, given that the price doesn't match the current price of fuel, i.e. EDL is operating at a loss, not at a profit. So it will...
You see, look, I will answer that from my perspective as an ex-member of the board of directors of EDL. It's just ridiculous, There is no country on earth, whether you give electricity 24 hours or you don't, it's ridiculous not to really sell at least at your production cost. How come we're actually producing at 13 cents per kilowatt hour, we're selling at 9, and at the end of the day, some clever person would come and tell me you're making loss. Of course I'm making loss. Let me sell at 13, I wouldn't make loss. You see, as simple as that. Now the issue, would you do this without giving the people, 24 hours supply and, making them get rid of the private generator? This is an issue that has to be solved gradually.
I hope so.
Yes, the microphone.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for your presentation and for the information given to us. Actually, part of my question was already asked by the gentleman there. First, if this free green energy is nice and profitable, how much is it appealing for the public and for the government in Lebanon, since you have been part in advising government and ministers? How appealing is this issue concerning the public and the government? Something else, why is it facing so much resistance to being implemented since a few years ago until now? Why is there resistance in the government and in the public to implement those laws and those profitable projects, and they are not being implemented, especially that we are always in a deficit concerning the energy bill? Why?
No, let me tell you, let's be realistic. And I've been for a long time, not advising, but close at least to the decision makers in this. I think Lebanon, among the Arab countries, has made tremendous success along the renewable energy way, along the renewable energy, path. Remember, Lebanon is the first country, maybe in the world, where the Central Bank of Lebanon would grant you, subsidized, loan to build your own power plant for your own home, for your own institutions. For example, when I was a president at Rafiq Hariri University, I built a power plant for the university for 100 kilowatt. Actually, it cost me nothing because they gave me a loan, and listen to this, Dr. Christina, they gave me a loan, $176,000 at that time, with an interest rate of 1% for 10 years. And in addition to that, they were making an agreement with the European Union. When I finished the power plant, a delegation from the European Union visited me at the university, and when they saw that I complied with the TOR, they gave me 15% grant. So, what do you want more than that? But you see, things take time. It takes time because, as I said, you can't do anything without having laws that actually support this. Now the law, as I said, you have two laws. There is the public law that gives EDL the monopoly over everything. This has to change. The alternative law that exists is the Law 462 that actually talks about the privatization, the British system, the British model, not the model we want where you favor renewable. So you have to change that. And to change that, because of the political situation, not in Lebanon, in the surrounding countries, there is this clash. Whatever you say, even you're gonna say that this is right, somebody will tell you that this is wrong, and things will continue this way. I hope it will not take long. But Lebanon, to be frank, and not really to accuse ourselves, has done great success along this renewable energy.
Mainly it's in the private sector. Mostly it has been in the private sector using the solar collector panels. I'm a consultant engineer.
Yeah.
I have done a project like 10, 12 years ago concerning solar collector panels on a small scale for about 200 square meters of solar collectors.
Yes.
Most of the buildings, they are using the solar collector panels for thermal issues. Like now, I'm working on the Penrose dormitory. The whole roof is being covered with solar collector panels. This is great. There is some projects with photovoltaic, which you should know better. But still, it's not something that being adopted on a government scale, on a large, medium, or large scale, and it's been really, I feel that there is always resistance for such projects. Is it because of the people of the fuel tycoon or the mafias that we're having? Let's talk frank. You want to be frank? We'll be frank. This is Lebanon. The lady said something at the beginning of her ending argument. Lebanon is weak and sectarian. So, and we did laugh. We did laugh, but actually we did laugh on ourselves because that's true. So it's still now. She said the $11 billion. How we are going to spend it? That's a great question. Thank you.
I just want to add something to what Dr. Shteed has said. When there's a law 462 that organizes the utility scale power that's in Lebanon, has not been implemented. No minister came and implemented the law. When they're not ministers, they say we should implement this law, but when they become ministers, they don't implement this law because they feel power is taken away from them. Now, in the absence of this law, there was a law by the Parliament, Law 288, that now is Law 54, that expired last week, actually, which said that in the meantime, until we establish the regulatory authority that can license private sector participation, the Ministry of Finance with the Ministry of Energy and Water can bring up proposals for private sector generation to the Council of Ministers, and the Council of Ministers can license these. But we all know the relationship between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Energy and Water. It's not Romeo and Juliet at all. For the past several years, the wind power, the 200 megawatt wind power from Akkar was based on this law. And I don't know how it escaped to the Council of Ministers, and it was licensed to generate, although the PPA is not bankable yet. It still needs to go back to the Council of Ministers. But there's something very weird happening in the Ministry of Energy and Water. The renewables, those in charge of the renewables, are working like an island versus those that are working for the conventional, as if these two are not meeting together. Mind you, 200 megawatts of wind is now supposed to be licensed and ongoing. 180 megawatts of solar PV is under bidding process. An additional 180 megawatt PV is going to be launched. The expression of interest for 300 megawatts PV with storage is now out. 200 to 400 additional megawatt of wind power expression of interest is out right now. So we're seeing these projects all of a sudden rain down in renewables, but as if they don't make a lot of sense, because the grid, the operator, so much reforms is needed. The whole problem with Sadr about giving us this 11 billion was that you guys have to do reforms. Electricity is 30–40% of our loan, $80 billion, is from the power sector. Can we continue this way or not? So we have to establish the regulatory authority, we have to reform. And so yes, you're right. What we're seeing now is a lot of talk, little action. Dr. Shadid is right. In the distributed level private sector, the soft loans were very important, although now they've also stalled because of the economic situation. But for the larger sector, there's, I don't know, schizophrenia in the approach of the government and how it's dealing with this issue, in my opinion.
I think Zahli's experience is very good. The Zahli, electricity of Zahli is one of the good projects. Because no, just...
I don't think so.
Fine. But I know for the end user, they are getting 24/24 electricity. He gathered the generators at one place and connect them to the network. And I know that some people are installing the photovoltaic and they are connecting it to grid. I was doing a design for a gentleman in Zahli. He told me the boilers, I want to use electrical resistance instead of a fuel boiler because I can get the electricity photovoltaic connected to the grid and it's very cheap. This is what's happening.
They have a concession. They're buying electricity from the government at 5 cents per kilowatt hour, at much lower cost, at much lower price or tariff than its real cost. It is not sustainable. If you make the whole of Lebanon like this, the government will be even in more debt. So the government has no interest at all to actually repeat the experiment of Zahli. It's unsustainable at all. I'm very sorry. They sell it in the TV, you know, they bring this guy from Zahli as if he is the savior of Lebanon. He is not.
I'm not saying. Sorry. No, probably you understood me wrong.
But he's back. But he's back on the list.
I am not talking about you. I'm not talking about people.
I just want to understand.
I'm talking about the issue is that at the end user, they are getting 24/24. The people who used to operate the generators are connected to the grid in a good way, and people are installing photovoltaic panels and connected to the grid online. This is something. Isn't this what we want? To use the renewable and connected and help?
Yeah, but look,
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not talking about the guy. I'm talking about the experience, the model.
It's a business, and if you want to make it general for the Lebanon, it has to make business sense. Otherwise, you cannot. This guy is getting free.
Maybe it doesn't work for the whole of Lebanon. For his case, probably it's good.
It's working because he's getting free money. His business is getting free money from the government. This is why it is working. I'm very sorry. If you take any other place, it cannot work. Because then you cannot provide electricity to the people if you don't have a good contract with the government. Yeah, there's a lot of facade on it. You know? Corruption.
We'll allow one last last question from Shakir, and then conclusion from Qadir, because food is getting...
With Dr. Harajli's last remark about the new tenders for wind and PV, I thought they were kind of supporting the privatization and microgrid, as Dr. Sheed was saying, because they are doing it from private sector, selling to the government, yes, but they are doing private sector. And for example, the 180 megawatt solar PV plants, they're gonna sell it less than 11 cents per kilowatt hour.
Less than 6 cents.
Even, yeah. So, but these aren't they contributing to the thing that Dr. Steve was saying about privatization, about renewable, about step by step, going step by step? I mean,
a microgrid of what Dr. Shteed is suggesting is different than a full-scale power plant integrating solely into the grid and being sold to the government. These are two different concepts. We in the UNDP are working on a village in Abricha in the south of Lebanon, where the municipality also has its own grid. We integrated a 250 kilowatt solar PV plant into their grid. When there's no power from EDL, that's no problem. Priority is going to the PV, and the generators are giving just the voltage required and giving more power when more is needed. The problem we had is when electricity from the grid came on. What do we do? Here we got an okay for the first time that we can connect the 250 kilowatt PV into the EDL grid, into the grid. And now with EDL, we're doing some sort of, we're trying to convince them to do the virtual net metering of power. And we have come a long way, and hopefully by September we're going to announce this community-led scheme on virtual net metering at the village scale, or we're going to announce its complete failure. So stay tuned until September, because this project was supposed to finish 2-3 years ago, but working with EDL is really, I mean, with all respect to all the equipe that they have, as you know how understaffed they are in many key places and all the problems that they're facing. So these are two different issues. With the renewable energy plants, it's very important what's happening, but I just feel they're happening in a vacuum. I just feel there's something wrong in the way that they're being thrown in such a way without a legal foundation, one, and two, there's so many issues. EDL doesn't have a board right now, and correct me, Professor Shdeed, does EDL have a board right now? No. Mafi board la EDL. It's like a ship without the captain. And the grid can only take 2,500 megawatts, whereas we're talking now, we're throwing projects worth, I don't know, 3,000, 4,000 megawatts, 5,000 megawatts. في شيء قبل شيء بده يصير, but there's something, the whole management of it is something wrong. This is what, as an observer, I'm saying it. I am with what they're doing with the renewables, but we have to be careful.
Any other comments from the panelists? You have the last question.
And as I hear you talking about the situation in Lebanon, and of course I read my newspaper and everything, I know the situation is very difficult. Nevertheless, when you are asking for government regulations, also in Germany, the government will not do something without public pressure. Is there any, in the societal system of Lebanon, is there any force or anything which would, any group of people who could start to exert this public pressure? You know, I come from a generation in Germany, we had a very different state at that time. And a generation somehow stood up and said, no, we don't want this any longer. Of course, the conditions were very different, I think, but I'm really curious, what are the conditions for that, and is there a potential?
I can answer this question very shortly.
Yes.
The answer is no.
Aha. Also not the young. I'm talking to the younger people, maybe because there are usually those who...
I think the answer is we haven't had an election in 9 years, and maybe we'll see in less than 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, but there must not be an election necessarily.
Because they will be the new representatives.
Well, actually, the situation, if you allow me now, you
Yes,
remind me
please.
of
Yeah,
of
and
a
they
saying
sound
by
very
one
naive.
prime minister,
Yeah.
an ex-prime minister,
Has been
who said,
killed.
no, wasn't killed,
Okay,
still
yeah.
alive, but he's
Another
very
one.
old now, Dr.
Yeah.
Al-Hass.
Yeah.
He said in Lebanon we have a lot of democracy, of freedom to say whatever you want, but very little of democracy to implement what you say.
So we're going to close it here.
Thank you.
Please, thank you very much.